The repartee is underway.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Yianna Bekris, and I'm the person behind Vouna.
And how would you describe the music of Vouna?
I think of it as a doom band, but not so much like sludgy or stoner doom, more kind of in the vein of funeral doom, or I really like kind of the doom of the Peaceful Three, like Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride. But with that said, I also think that the music has kind of a blackened edge to it, and I really like adding ambience with synths, and I like folk instrumentation too. So I guess that's kind of a long way to describe it. But yeah.
So how do you, in terms of describing Vouna's music, how do you feel about the terms like funeral doom, gothic doom, maybe doom drone that sometimes get attached to what you do?
Well, I like all those types of music. I think I like funeral doom the most. I do like gothic doom too, but I think there's some things about gothic doom in general that, or I don't know, there's like some sects of gothic doom that I'm not a huge fan of. And especially, having the band be female fronted, I think people also have some conceptions about like what a female fronted gothic doom band sounds like. And I don't think Vouna sounds like that as much, but I love funeral doom. It's probably my favorite style of doom.
And as you mentioned, there are elements of folk music a folk influence to Vouna's music, specifically Greek folk music, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Would you mind telling me how Greek folk music is different from other types of folk music that people may be familiar with? Like, for example, how is Greek folk music different from, like, say, the style of folk music that comes from England or Northern Europe?
Well, to be honest, I don't know too much about folk music as far as the specific music theory behind it or anything like that. But Greek folk music has when I hear, Irish folk music and things like, or like Scandinavian folk music, there is a much different flavor than Greek folk music, which it has a lot of, I don't really know the history as much as I should, but it has a lot of Ottoman influence. But I mean, also even ancient Greek influence, I think. And it just uses different scales, different time signatures. I don't play around with the time signatures too much in my music, but I do like to play around with the scales, which I actually haven't put in Vouna's music as much as I would like to, because I think the scales are really interesting and cool.
How much of a challenge is it to integrate those scales that you talk about using Western instruments?
Well, it's actually not as hard as you would think, because a lot of Greek instruments, like I play bouzouki on the album, it has like the same tonality as like a guitar or something like that. So I don't think it's that difficult. It's more like, I guess, having different chord progressions and that are more just pure metal influenced, and figuring out how to like put more of a Greek sound over it. I've actually heard some other bands incorporate Greek folk and Greek music into metal really well. I think I didn't even know Septic Flesh was Greek when I first heard them, but I instantly thought they were Greek from just like the different, I don't know if you've ever listened to that band, but just like the different synths and instrumentation they're using, they were like definitely using some of the scales, and I could tell it was very Greek influenced.
Very cool. I should mention that in addition to Vouna, you also play guitar in Eigenlicht.
Oh yeah.
And in Vouna, you play all the instruments, including the drums, right?
I do. I play everything.
Can you tell me a little bit about the genesis of the project and what your intentions were when you started it?
Well, I didn't actually have any intentions really when I started it. I just have been kind of writing doom songs for a long time. And I started recording this project, or kind of like making more demos and trying to actually put songs together, because my other bands were kind of all going on hiatus. And so I just, yeah, I just was like playing music for fun. It's like I would say it's like a compulsive hobby that I had, or that I have. And Eigenlicht and Radiazi weren't really doing anything. So I just was like recording stuff, and it just kind of grew from there. Then I recorded the first album. And after I did that, of course, I was like, well, I guess I can record an album on my own. So I probably should do it again, because the first one I was kind of just getting a feel for recording on my own and writing everything completely 100% on my own. So I just felt like I had to do it again, because I thought I was like really growing a lot and I could do a better job with it,
Now, was the intention always to be a solo project, or did you originally seek out collaborators for this?
It was always to be a solo project.
With you playing all the instruments?
Yeah, I drums were my first instrument that I played in bands, and I just really missed playing them. So it was kind of an excuse for me to do everything and to have just total control over every single piece of the music, which I've never had before.
Was it also an opportunity for you to express musical ideas that maybe didn't fit into some of your other projects?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of the other projects I've been in have been more black metal focused, and I love black metal, don't get me wrong, but I have a very special place in my heart for doom. So, I don't know how much you've listened to Eigenlicht, but I definitely was, there's definitely some doom riffs in that band because I like doom, but the band was never going to be completely doom. My bandmates wouldn't have let me do that.
Why doom? What do you like about doom?
I just like how huge it sounds. And I think other types of metal can sound really huge and epic, but I just think there's something, the whole point of doom is to be like really huge and heavy. And so, yeah, that's why I love it.
So that first album came out at the end of 2018, right? The self-titled album?
Yes.
How long had you been working on it before it was released?
So I started some of those riffs on that album. I wrote like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something, but I hadn't really like put them into songs. I think between writing and recording, it was honestly kind of a pretty quick turnaround time. I started writing it, I don't know, maybe like a year or something like that between when I started writing it and when it was released.
With complete control over all the arrangements and all the instrumentation, did you find that, obviously control can be a benefit, but control can also have a flip side where if you're not happy with things, you tend to redo them over and over and over again. Did you find that happening with you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I kind of need to figure out how to not do that anymore, because I definitely would be like, okay, I like this part, but I don't like it enough, and then I would kind of chase my tail. And I think sometimes there's diminishing returns when you do that. And I don't think it necessarily results in better songs. And you get also really, not only do you chase your tail on certain parts, but there's other parts that you ignore that you should be chasing your tail on, I think, but you just don't know. And it's just all you, but that's also kind of the beauty of a solo project, I think.
When is the song done for you?
Honestly, it's kind of never done. I kind of start getting this feeling that I shouldn't keep going, I guess. I kind of I'm like, oh, I shouldn't revise this anymore. But even when I record a song, I don't really feel like it's done when I record it. I almost feel like it's a snapshot of that song in that moment. And even playing stuff live, like sometimes I'll change little things live after the song is recorded. But I try not to tinker too much, because I also think that can result in bad songwriting.
In terms of your songwriting, how do you usually start? Do you start with the riffs? Do you start with synths, melodies? Do you start with the drums?
Kind of all of the above. I don't usually start with the drums, but with the first,
Not necessarily drums, but like the rhythm.
Yeah.
Is rhythm important to Vouna?
Oh, definitely. And being a drummer, I definitely I'm like tapping on things all the time. And I mean, they were my main instrument for a really long time. And it's like what I started playing as far as like a rock instrument when I was the youngest, So I'm always like tapping on things. And then sometimes I'll be like, oh, this is a cool rhythm, I should use that. In general, I'll just like, have rhythms or melodies in my head. And then I'll try to like translate them to an instrument, or I'll sing them. But I try to like let the first seed of the song come very naturally and just come from that sort of process, just kind of like sitting around or like doing my thing out in the world and like tapping on things or like thinking of a melody. And then I'll like take that and it's kind of like a seed for a song. And then I'll like start demoing like around that, and then after that, I'll kind of just see where the song leads me. And that's kind of how I've naturally written in other projects. But the first album wasn't so much like that. It was more like I was jamming on a synth all the time, and it was very like influenced by the synthesizer. But this one, I tried to have it be more like organic and spontaneous. And I also wrote more of the riffs on guitar, I'm like way better at guitar than synth. So it just was like more natural, I guess you could say.
At what point do the vocal lines and the lyrics come in?
So some of the vocal lines are just things that I like will hum to myself. And sometimes it sounds weird, but sometimes I'll actually like dream vocal lines. And I'm kind of terrified that someday I'm going to like it's going to actually be like a Cher song or something, or like something I heard in the grocery store by accident, I'm especially doing clean vocals, but I don't think that's happened yet. So sometimes the vocals will come first, like Highest Mountain. I wrote like the end thing, just kind of like, right. I think I like wrote that vocal line just commuting to work in my truck, because my truck doesn't have a music. So I just was like singing in the morning, and I was like, oh, I kind of like that. And then I just kept singing it to myself. But other times I like don't do the vocals until the very, very end. Like I'm like, oh, I don't want to write the vocals at all, because that's also like the thing that comes the least naturally to me. I only just started singing like with the first album, basically. The lyrics are also something that I try to like not procrastinate too much on the lyrics, but they definitely come last. They're like the dead last thing that I do.
In terms of doing the vocals, did it take you some time to find a style that you were comfortable with?
Oh yeah. Well, the thing that was hard for me is I've never really sang before. So I would try to sing and I'd be like, I'm singing now. So I'm going to like make my voice sound like I'm singing, but that's not really what you're supposed to do. You're just kind of supposed to let your voice be how it is. And it took me a while to figure that out. And I think with the first one, I was like still having a hard time with that. But this one, I like finally had figured it out, but I need to keep practicing singing, because it's really difficult. Clean vocals are like so difficult.
I'm curious, were you self-taught as far as playing all these instruments, or did you go to music school or have some other kind of training?
I'm self-taught, except I started playing flute when I was a kid, but just like in school band sort of thing, and so neither my parents are musicians or anything, but my grandma was a musician, and my mom I think she just really liked that my grandma played piano. So she put me in piano lessons for like a pretty short time when I was a kid, just like a year or something. But then with the flute, I remember at one point, I just was like, I want to play drums. I mean, don't get me wrong, the flute is great and I love the flute, but I just was like, I had started listening to metal. This was when I was really young. I was probably like, 13 or something. So I started playing drums, and I was playing drums in band, and I was playing in marching band. And so I guess you could say I have a little formal training on drums. And I then took drum lessons when I was a little bit older, like when I was about 20, I took jazz drum lessons, not because I like jazz, but just because I think the drumming is, I mean, I do like jazz, but I wasn't aspiring to be a jazz musician. I just think the drumming is really cool. So I took lessons from a jazz drummer, but that's all the musical training I have.
Whoa.
So you mentioned playing live. Do you have a live lineup that accompanies you, or do you play mostly by yourself?
I have a full live lineup.
But they're not, in terms of recording though, you still handle everything on your own, right?
Yeah, I handle everything on the recording on my own. On this album, I did have some guests come in, including some of the live lineup. Like I had Autumn, or she actually isn't in the band anymore because she moved away, but she played the synth interlude in What Once Was, because she's really good at just like, fiddling with pedals and making cool sounds. And then Caitlin, who also just moved away, played the electric lap steel in Highest Mountain. Caitlin was the other guitar player.
When you play live and when you play with collaborators, other musicians, do you find your songs change at all? Is there a different feeling to them?
Yeah, I think anytime anyone plays music, they like leave their fingerprints on it. So yeah, so definitely, I think the collaborators on the album, like everywhere that there's someone else playing on the album, they left their own like special vibe in there, and when we play live, I definitely think my bandmates even though they're playing like the exact notes and like doing everything, basically as it is on the album, they definitely add their flavor to it.
And what would you say that flavor is? What would you say the difference is between Vouna on the records and Vouna live?
Well, live, I think, I have a really hard time really quantifying it, but it just is more like a band, like when you hear, I mean, it's not always the case, but I think a lot of times when there's like one person project, it really sounds like a one person project. And I was trying hard to like not have the record sound like it was a one person project, but I still kind of think it sounds like that. But live, it does become more of a band because everyone has like a slight different playing style. And there's just so many ways to play different instruments. So on the record, it's like all my playing style, like every single thing is my playing style. But live, it's like the drummer, he has his playing style, or like the synth player has her playing style, or my bassist has their playing style. Like it's just all, everyone just leaves their mark. But it's hard to really put into words exactly what that is for each individual person. I just think it sounds more like a band because it sounds more like a group of people playing together rather than just myself playing to myself.
Is your live lineup 4 people, 5 people?
5 total. So me and 4 other people.
So let's talk about Atropos. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, I think so. Anglicized.
Anglicized. I've only ever seen it in comic books, so.
Oh yeah.
hopefully, native Greek speakers will forgive my pronunciation. Atropos is the name of Vouna's second album, and it came out last week at the time that we're speaking, on July 16th, 2021, through Profound Lore Records. Tell me a little bit about the writing process and your intentions going into this album.
Well, I guess as I was telling you earlier, it was kind of an outgrowth of the last album, and it was just kind of, I didn't really have intentions with this album. I just was like, I have all this music that I'm writing and I want to record this music. And all the songs are very much a progression of my own songwriting and process. And you can definitely hear it in like the difference of the songs. Like the last 2 songs on the album, I wrote those first, and they're really kind of like an extension of the last album. And then the first 2 songs were the last songs I wrote. And those are kind of like, I would say, more the direction that the band is going, or at least like they're more in line with what I've been writing more recently. But I didn't really have any intentions specifically other than just trying to bring life to this music that I have in my head.
So when you say that the first songs, or the first couple songs, are more in the direction of where you're headed, how would you describe that direction? And how would you describe the difference between those songs and what you've done previously? Well,
I don't want to say, I don't want to say that's where I'm headed exactly, because I don't know how things will progress as I like am writing, and because I feel like I just never really know. But the first two songs were very much written on the guitar, and I was also using different kinds of synthesizers. I was using an analog synth more rather than like kind of, I really like 90s romplers, which of course those make their appearances in those first songs too. The second two songs, they're more synth based, like a lot of the riffs I wrote on the synth. Like Gray Sky, almost all the riffs were written on the synth first. And What Once Was, it's the same thing. I wrote almost all the riffs on the synth first. And I also used to write with my acoustic guitar. I wrote the entire first album on the acoustic guitar, and I also wrote the last two songs on the album on acoustic guitar. But the first two songs I wrote on electric guitar, and I'm getting much more comfortable demoing with electric guitar. So I think it's not necessarily like a matter of, I think it results in something different, but it's kind of like the way that my process is. And maybe there's not like a lot of intention behind it, but that's just what happens with the difference in process.
Can you tell me what the difference is between demoing on an acoustic guitar and on an electric guitar? Is it purely the feeling, or is it something else?
Oh yeah, it's definitely the feeling. Well, with an acoustic guitar, you can't really do like a lot of the like metal playing that you think of, like palm muting, more like leady stuff, like fast leads and things. Those are really difficult on the acoustic guitar. I think tremolo picking is also kind of difficult on the acoustic guitar, but I've just done it so much at this point, it's not too bad. And also with the acoustic guitar, it's not like distorted, you're just hearing kind of like the raw notes. And I actually really like that because there are a lot of harmonies. I don't know like that much about it, but I do think there are maybe like these little harmonics that happen with an acoustic guitar that maybe don't happen with an electric guitar, or they get buried with the distortion. So yeah, so I think it's just different in how it sounds. And also with the acoustic guitar, I would like just play it, like sit on my couch and play acoustic guitar and then be like, oh, I like that riff. I'm going to like, go over to my computer and record it. But with the electric guitar, in order for me to like, I'll like play my electric guitar not plugged in, but it's not as fun. So I'll like, play the electric guitar almost always. Like, I don't usually have my amp. I'm usually like attached to a computer and using like an amp modeler, which isn't so bad, or it's not as bad as it sounds. But yeah, that's what I would say is a difference.
So you mentioned that a few of the Vouna live members made contributions to the album. Can you tell me about some of the other guests that you have performing on the album?
Yeah, so I had Entrail, who is a musician here in Olympia who does like kind of their own kind of like ambient stuff. They have their own project and it's called Entrail. And they played violin, and they'll like do violin and sing and also play bass and then kind of like layer it. I think their music is really cool. I would highly recommend to check it out.
Yeah, somebody sent me the Entrail album, and it's very cool if you like ambient music. It's kind of a droney, ambient, neo-folk kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's really cool. And I also had Asia Kindred Moore play on it, and she plays the harp. She plays in a neo-folk band called Sangre de Muérdago, and she is just an amazing harp player. She has her own project called Solace, which is kind of like ambient harp. And I've actually been helping her record an album, and hopefully she'll be able to release that soon. But she has like a beautiful voice, really good at recording, or really good at harp. And she like will do things like plug the harp into pedals. But yeah, so she played harp, and I'm really hoping I can continue having her play on my records if I record ever again. And then Nathan Weaver from Wolves in the Throneroom sang on Vanish. He did harsh vocals because I don't really do those types of vocals, or I just don't really feel like I'm good at it, so, but I just love his vocals. So he contributed. And Wolves in the Throneroom have an album coming out soon, which is pretty awesome. So I recommend people check that out too.
Hopefully Wolves in the Throne Room will be on this podcast soon. We'll talk a little bit after this interview. But speaking of Wolves, you recorded the album yourself at their studio, right? The Owl Lodge? I
did, yeah. Well, and they helped me record my first one. And they were a lot more involved in that one. Not so much in like, yeah, they like were kind of the ones who kind of pushed me to record my album in the first place. Cause they have a studio and they were like trying to get more people to record in the studio. So they just were like, we have the studio and we'll help you like record your album if you want. So I was like, oh, sure. Just because, well, Aaron, who is the drummer of Wolves in particular, he was wanting more experience like recording, you know? So yeah, I just was like, okay, I wasn't even like thinking of really recording, but also at the same time that, or like recording in a studio, you know, but also at the same time, that'd be really cool. So yeah, so I recorded it, or Aaron and Nathan, his brother, they like recorded it. And I had an engineer come in for the drums because those guys hadn't really had experience recording drums before. So yeah, they like recorded the first one for me. And then after it was done, they offered to put it out on their record label because they also were I was kind of like their guinea pig. I think they wanted to like just see what it was like putting out another band's record. And I was kind of like, you know, hesitant at first, but then, you know, what musician doesn't want their record on vinyl, you know, so, or their album on vinyl. And then on this one, they let me record in the studio again. And they helped me a little bit with like setup and stuff, but I didn't want to like take up, you know, a ton of their time, and I wanted to do everything on my own. And then the engineer who recorded the drums in the last one, Ethan Camp, he came and recorded the drums again for me because I just can't do that on my own. But yeah, so I learned a lot about recording this time, and it also sounds really good because I got to use like, you know, the fancy equipment they have, and yeah, it was awesome.
You recorded the first album yourself on your own software, right?
Yeah. So the first one, well, my very first demo that I did, which I actually wasn't really going to release to the world, but because the guys in Wolves were like, oh, we'll put out your album. Cause I was like literally just going to make a tape and then take it on tour. They were like, we want to put out your album, but that means you can't like put your tape out yet. And so I was like, damn it. So I was like, I guess I'll just release this like demo thing that I have. So that demo, which is available online, that was recorded on my own software, just like, you know, with GarageBand or whatever. But the first album was recorded in the studio, and I think it was with Pro Tools. It was like, you know, what the guys and Wolves have in their studio. And then this time the album, well, those guys had switched over what they were using. They were using Ableton, and they had like switched their whole setup to that. So I just went, you know, I just kind of went with their setup, and I actually really like Ableton. So that's what I switched to it too. I graduated from GarageBand, so now I'm demoing in Ableton.
I mean, besides the Wolves guys, there was a list of recognizable names who worked on the mixing and mastering of this album. So you mentioned Ethan Camp, who's worked with Mortiferum, who helped record the drums. Greg Chandler from Lichgate mixed it, and Dan Lowndes, I think that's how you say his name, from Cruciamentum mastered it. How did all these guys get involved?
Well, so Ethan, I actually have known for a long time, and he recorded Eigenlicht, which is how I kind of first met him. And here in Olympia, he was kind of like the go-to guy to record for a long time. He actually moved away for a while, but he's moving back now, which I'm happy about. And then Greg Chandler was recommended to me by Chris Bruni of Profound Lore. And I like really like Esoteric, so I liked the idea, of course. And Dan Lowndes actually was recommended to me by Ethan because he had, around the time that I was doing my first album, Mortiferum had done their first tape or whatever, and Ethan had just recorded that too. So he was like, "Oh, this guy Dan Lowndes from Cruciamentum, or however you say his band name, he like did a really great job on the Mortiferum recording." And of course I had heard it at that point. So I was like, "Oh, I'll talk to him." And he was really great to work with. So of course I wanted to work with him again. And it was just like great because he'd also worked with him and Greg, like, I guess, have known each other for a long time and have worked together a lot. So it just all worked out really well.
can you tell me a little bit what the album title, which I butchered, refers to, and about some of the lyrical themes of the album?
Yeah, so Atropos, she's like the fate of she's the oldest of the three sister fates or whatever. And I actually don't know very much about Greek mythology, but so I'm not sure if I have that right, but I think that is right. So there's like the three fates, and there's one who like spins the thread, and then one who measures the length, and then the one who cuts the thread. And she's the one who cuts the thread. So she kind of like is the one who's like, okay, you're gonna like die like now. And I know it's a very overexplored theme in Doom, but I'd like just been dealing with like death a lot in my life during the course of this album. So the songs just ended up kind of being like that. And I also have always had a morbid fascination with death, like a lot of people. And it's just interesting. I work in the sciences, and I work more now. I'm like in climatology, but before I was like more in ecology. So like kind of biology stuff, but that's not really like my realm. But despite that, I do like to read about.
Oh, this is not good. You work in climatology and you have a doom metal band. Like, I feel like this is an ominous. Yeah. I'm in grad school right now. I'm studying climatology, but before I was working doing all ecology stuff, and I did that for years. So I like have a science background, and I'm always like very interested in just kind of like the sciencey side of everything. And that includes death. And it's interesting to me that we have all these mythologies and religions, and a lot of it is just like describing the physical world and what's going on around us. So it's interesting to me that there's like this fate that cuts your thread and one that measures the length, because that's very much kind of how our biology works in a lot of ways. We can do these things to like modify our biology, but the human lifespan is very limited, and there's not really a lot that we can do to extend it. Maybe someday we'll be able to extend it, but so far it seems kind of like there's a cap, and we get old and we die, and it's just a natural part of life. And I as someone who was like working in ecology for a really long time, I actually found a lot of beauty in death, like the old growth forest around here. A tree will like fall, and then that tree will become a nurse log, and there'll be all these seedlings on it, and it will actually be a place of like abundance. So I wasn't exactly trying to have the album be just about death in this like depressing way. I wanted it to be kind of more complex than that, like, because I find there's a lot of beauty in death too, even though, obviously no one wants to die. Sometimes people want to die. I've wanted to die many times in my life, but it's just like often approached as like this really dark thing, when it's actually just like this part of life, and it's very complex. And there's like, I don't know. And there's also a finality to it, which I think is why people are fascinated by it, myself included. And I just, when I've been in mourning, I think about how like a lot of times when you're like mourning someone, it'll be like the happy memories that will like bring about the grief. You're like, oh, I have this like happy memory of a person, and you will feel this like tinge of happiness, but then it'll also like really sting. And I was kind of trying to like, I was kind of wanting to like express that with the album. And I think that's something too with thinking about the fates, because I don't know very much about mythology, but it's just like this very matter of fact thing. It's like, it is this way, like, or it isn't this way. And that's kind of why I think I've always been really attracted to science too, is because it's kind of just like, this is how it is. And there's not necessarily like
emotion attached to it or whatever. I don't know. Maybe I might be rambling too much here, but that's kind of why I was like attracted to naming the album after Atropos.
So speaking of death and rebirth, things are starting to open up, at least in parts of Europe and in the US, and bands are starting to go on tour, things like that. Do you guys have any plans to promote the album?
Well, I definitely want to go on tour, but I haven't booked anything yet. But there are plans to do that. And I really hope that things open up and we can get on the road, because I miss it so much. I miss playing live a lot and going to shows, and I just miss the whole like community that is around live music too. I just miss it all, but there's no solid plans yet.
So Atropos is out now through Profound Lore Records. Yianna, how can people order the album? What's the best way to get it? I
would say go to the Profound Lore website and web store, but you can also go to my Bandcamp. Yeah, I think those are the best ways to order it.
So you mentioned liking vinyl and wanting to put out your music on vinyl. I understand Profound Lore has a few limited edition vinyl versions that are on pre-order right now. Can you tell me a little bit about what the label has planned?
Oh yeah, there is a purple vinyl. It's splattered with like, I think it's like with gold. That one looks really, really cool. And then the other one it's like silver and gold and red. That one also looks really, really cool. Of like go along with the artwork. I just got the albums a couple days ago, or I got them like exactly on the 16th when the album came out, and they're beautiful. So I highly recommend them.
And if people want to follow you online and keep up to date with what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so we have a Facebook and an Instagram. Yeah, I think you can just look up Vouna. I think it's Vouna Band on Instagram and Vouna Metal on Facebook.
Is anything going on with Eigenlicht? Do you guys have any music coming out?
We don't. We actually are on a hiatus, and I'm not sure if we're ever going to get back together. So Mara Winter of Eigenlicht moved to Switzerland because she went to grad school for historical flutes. So she like plays early music on flutes that are replicas of what they played in, the time of early music. And she's an amazing musician and has like, I would, that's also something else I'd highly recommend, is to look her up, because she has some cool flute stuff and other cool projects. But she lives in Europe now, and I think it'd be pretty hard to do Eigenlicht without her. At least I wouldn't want to do it without her. So we're on an extended hiatus, but if she ever comes back, I think we definitely will be looking to do another Eigenlicht album.
With Eigenlicht on hiatus, are you looking to do another black metal project, or is Vouna it for you right now?
I think it's it for me right now. I actually am kind of wanting to play drums in a project, though. But I don't think I'd play guitar in another project or contribute to any songwriting in another project.
How come?
Just because I have a hard time writing for multiple projects. I was doing it with Eigenlicht and Variazi, my folk project, for a while. And I just kind of like to put all my eggs in one basket, songwriting wise. I think because I really like to like immerse myself in the process, and I feel like I can't do that with two different projects at once.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else you want people to know about?
I don't know. Well, thanks for having me on your podcast, and I don't know what else to say. I've like barely talked to anyone with the quarantine and everything.
Yeah, no, actually, well, I've got this, and I've got a podcast about comic books, which is why we had a little bit of unintentional comedy at the beginning of the recording, because I'm used to speaking to older gentlemen who don't know how to connect to the computer audio, and so there's usually a couple minutes of coaching to get them to be able to use their mics correctly. And as it turns out, the old guy making a mistake today was me. So everything comes full circle. But yeah, point being, 2 days a week, I'll speak to people for about an hour, and one will be for this podcast, and the other will be for the other podcast. And other than that, I don't really see or hear from people. So it's, I don't know. After a while, you just kind of get used to it. I don't know if you're acclimating to it at all. Speaking of climatology.
I think I am, but I'm definitely ready to get back out there. And, I like to, I don't know, I have kind of a limited capacity for talking to people in general, but I'm feeling like I'm losing my humanity a little bit. So I'm excited to get back out there. That's for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Yianna.
Thanks for having me.
Conversation can be fun, rewarding, and very exciting. So call me up and we'll get you chatting in no time. Conversations, they're a lark.